Hello and welcome to Arts and Entertainment.
With Chris and Randall.
I'm Chris,
I'm Randall.
and this will be our last episode in what was, I think, six episodes on 19th and 20th century visual art from Europe.
I can't remember now. It's 5 or 6, yes.
We have been working up to this point. We've been dealing mostly with the transition from representational art from figurative art to abstract art. But this time we're also dealing, now that we get into the 20th century, with people who had their own very defined views of art and had the capacity to really impact the world of art while not really being quote unquote good artists. In this case, we're dealing with Adolf Hitler. But before we get any further, as always, please like, share, subscribe, and comment. We really need to know from you what kind of shows you want us to do, what kind of shows you don't want us to do. If there was a show you wanted us to revisit, if you've got your own point of view, we'd love to hear it. So, Randall, what's a great way of getting in touch with us?
Well, just go to our website, first of all, chrisandrandall.com, and also our Facebook page, Arts and Entertainment with Chris and Randall.
Excellent. Well, again, this will be the last one of the series, and I have had a lot of fun with this, and I'm really kind of fun by this because we're really looking at it now from a art, really more from almost a socio-political standpoint now, and not just the visual aesthetic. All right, Randall, take us away.
All right, to begin with, this episode is about Hitler's aesthetic taste in art. This is going to be fascinating. I've done a lot of research. So what you're seeing on your screen is a Rudolf Ritter von Alt. It is probably, I would say, one of Hitler's favorite artists. I mean, no one says that. Hitler doesn't say that. But when Hitler starts painting, many of his paintings look like von Alt paintings. So he is mimicking this style. I'll show you those paintings as well. Just to give you a little background, I mean, we already did like 4 or 5 episodes on the birth of the modern world, which I would say starts in 1910 with the first abstract painting. Okay, but there's such a huge backlash that the Nazis come to power in 1933, and one of the first things they do is establish the Reich Culture Chamber. Goebbels is in charge, and the Reich Culture Chamber's job is to go through and make sure that artists are making proper art. So the Nazis wage a war against art. I mean, I don't know. To modern people, I think, Chris, this notion that the first thing you're gonna do when you get in charge is gonna wage a war against art, it just seems ridiculous. I mean,
Yeah.
would you say that, Chris?
Well, it really does show you, and again, we talked a little bit about this in our last episode where we were talking about people like Rudolf Steiner and Blavatsky, that in the 19th and early 20th century, well, even you can see it today in our culture wars, that art isn't just for artists and those who enjoy art. Art can be a political statement, and if so, it could be a threatening political statement. So I'm not really surprised.
Yes, an abstract art, I think I made the case in the last episode at the end, Chris. The abstract art truly creates a worldview where things are in flux, where things are not absolute. And that's true. That's how the physical world actually is, as proven by Einstein.
Right.
But it's the Christian world, the Western world, the Christian world that believes that things should be absolute, that things are fixed, things are decided. And that's the world that people like Hitler could not deal with in 1933.
Right.
So I'll just say some background about Hitler. He comes from a small town. He moves to Vienna. He wants to be an artist, and he loves, like you can see, he loves painters like von Alt. He never gets into art school due to his lack of originality and his reluctance to paint people, figures. The art school tells him to be an architect. And ironically, when he becomes the leader of Germany, he becomes obsessed with architecture, and he helps design all sorts of buildings and things.
Well, it's interesting too because Albert Speer, who is a very prominent Nazi architect, is probably the only architect in history I've ever associated as an architect involved with a totalitarian society.
And a lot. I read Speer's book, which is where I'm going to get a lot of this information. So yeah, Speer was very interesting. I just want to say, so when Hitler is living in Vienna, trying to make it as an artist, he's like painting postcards. He's painting buildings for people on the street. I mean, he's basically homeless. He's living in homeless shelters. A contemporary, a friend of Hitler, when he was in this period, said Hitler was never an ardent worker. He was unable to get up in the morning, had difficulty in getting started, and seemed to be suffering from a paralysis of the will, which honestly sounds like every artist I've ever met, Chris.
Jeez, that's why I know I'm an artist.
Okay, so let's look at some Von Alts. So this you can see is a Von Alt. Here's another one. You see Von Alt, he paints a lot of these buildings.
And for those of you who are just listening, I know I haven't really got into great description, so I'm just going to say these are very standard paintings of German streets and German buildings circa turn of the century, like late 19th century, early 20th century. The people are very small. The real attention is not on the people at all, but on the architectural design of the buildings, which are nice looking, are no more distinct than any other European city of its era.
Sure. Here's another one.
Again, there's just cityscapes of people almost the size of ants, some just going about doing whatever it is they're doing, and then buildings and plazas.
Now this is interesting because you can see in this one it's kind of an unusual angle. It's got like a lot of signs on the wall.
It's like the back of a building. You see trash, you see posters on a wall, but everything is off center. So it looks like it's on a right angle or a left angle.
Something like that. Yeah, it's off kilter.
Yeah.
Let's look at it.
Beyond its compositional element, it's pretty much like any other painting you might have seen.
It's another one. This is like it's kind of like a depiction of small town life almost.
Yeah.
It
has almost a photorealistic quality to it in that, the trees and the mountains on the left-hand side look real. The city streets look real. It all looks like someone just took their phone and just took but I mean, there's no real great point of focus. Like if you've ever taken an amateur photograph, then you know that, if you've ever taken an amateur photograph, you know that this is kind of what it would look like, where everything is there, but there's nowhere for the eye to really focus on.
Okay, so that's it with this guy. Let's look at some Nold right now.
I like Emil Nold.
Okay, so here's a Nold. Now, this is from page 27 of the first edition American of Speer's book. Speer says, to decorate the Goebbels house, I borrowed a few watercolors from Nold from Eberhard Hafstengel, the director of the Berlin National Gallery. Goebbels and his wife were delighted with the paintings until Hitler came to inspect and expressed his severe disapproval. Then the minister summoned me immediately. The pictures have to go at once. They're simply impossible.
We just did the Blue Riders for the last couple of episodes. So Emil Nold is also a Blue Rider. And while we were dealing with Kandinsky, for those of you who, again, are just listening, this is very abstract. The color of the sky is a mixture of grayish clouds and a deep blue. The ground is a mixture of a very emerald-like green and a very hard yellow, and it is like a barn house almost there in the background, but it's very powerful. Actually, I prefer Nold to Kandinsky, so to me, this is a beautiful work.
Well, the reason I'm showing this is because within the Nazi Party, most of the Nazis were with Hitler in terms of taste, but within the Nazi Party, Nold was on the line. Okay, so his work, you can see, is still figurative,
but only very vaguely so. I mean, if you cover stuff, it's almost just barely there.
We'll look at some others. So, yeah, this one is even more this is a landscape, but it's going more into abstraction.
Right, as it would
Uh,
have been the case with Kandinsky around the same time.
okay, now here's more of the thing that the Nazis might have hanging in their house. Okay, this is just like a painting of sunflowers,
Sunflowers, yeah.
but it's still quite stylized. I mean, the colors are fairly accurate, I would say, but this, but you see that it's a
I
painting
don't
of
know who the
flowers, Chris.
artist is. Do you?
This is Nold still.
Oh, is it okay? It's interesting. It definitely has his again the deep blue. So I knew it's a blue rider. Uh, I like it again, but I mean, yes, you could say it's representational to a degree, but not by much.
Here's another one. This is more of a what Nold was famous for painting flowers.
Yes,
Okay.
very pleasant.
Okay, but this is the kind of thing that Hitler couldn't deal with. Okay. Uh, okay, this one is way too figurative for Hitler, obviously.
And the colors are again just very, very strong.
Okay, here's one. I like this one. The masks,
These are like death masks or acting masks, yeah.
and this is the last Nold. It's like a landscape. Okay.
And again, the colors are have no basis in reality, which I love. Everything is a heightened color, almost
So
like
yes, so Nold is kind of like the artist that people think. Well, Nold is modern, true, but he's not so crazy that he's totally abstract. I mean, Hitler will be fine with him. I mean, that's what
right. You
Speer
can
thought.
you can certainly know that you're looking at a scenic painting of the ocean and the sky. The only thing that makes it even remotely abstract is that the colors are just a little more vibrant than we're used to. Though technically, these are colors that you might find at sunset on the sky, not so much at the bottom of the water.
Okay, so let's look at Grützner. This guy, according to on page 43, Speer writes one of Hitler's as well as Hoffman's favorite painters was Eduard Grützner.
And this is a very traditional, is that a 19th century painting? Clearly,
1870.
yeah, life models dressed as elegant aristocrats at a party and in various little scenes. But I think there's three or four scenes of little tableaus of people. Um, but it's perfectly fine if not particularly remarkable.
So the Grützner was famous for painting small town life and also monks,
Yeah.
like in this one. So
So monks sitting down in a monastery just it looks like they're having a glass of wine. That's about it.
so Grützner loved painting drunk monks in the monastery.
Really.
Yes, and this is what Hitler loved.
In a weird way, this guy is like the Norman Rockwell of 19th century Germany.
Yes, and you know the interesting thing about him too is, or about Hitler liking him is, I don't think Hitler drank that much, as far as I could tell. So here's another one. You can see like everyone's
Monks
inebriated.
again by their large, pitchers of wine and flasks and vats. Yeah.
So
Another drunk monk. Yeah, he
here's
really had to think for drunk monks.
so this is a portrait of somebody with like a flask of alcohol and he's
Yeah.
drunk. He has got a drunk
It's
look
a
on his
big
face.
ass flask, let me tell you.
Here's some monks just partying.
Yep, that's pretty much all they're doing, playing their instruments and drinking their booze.
Here's a monk drinking, like
Yeah,
literally drinking.
yep, and that might be brandy, but yeah.
And here's the last one. He's like
Good
holding...
old German beer steins.
So what do you think about these Grützners? I mean,
But I do think kind of like Rockwell, he is trying to capture people at play, people being festive, little vignettes of life. A very nice representational realist. He might as well have been a photographer.
there's nothing about these paintings. You know the thing I find interesting about these paintings that supposedly Hitler loved is uh there's nothing really extraordinary about them. I mean,
They're easy to understand. They are very easy. You know what I'm saying? Like
Mhm.
even an 8-year-old, just as child, could go, okay, that guy's happy, that woman's sad. Grown-ups will go, that person's gonna has a bird in their hand and a bunch of beers. Maybe they're gonna kill that bird, eat it, cook it, and then drink it, wash it down with beer.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know another way to say it, but Hitler was not a complex thinker, I don't think.
I don't know if that, but I just know that when it came to art, he liked art that very, very much replicated the known world.
Here, let's look at some Leibl. So this is actually let's look at maybe we should look at some Hitler.
Okay, let's look at his works.
So some of these works I want you to know is like
Is that a watercolor?
I believe it is, yes.
Some of this pretty good watercolorist. I'll give him that. So it's very hard to work in watercolor, and
Yeah, I just want you to know some of these works may not be Hitler's because over the years, there's been a lot of forgeries, people trying to make money. But I think I've found actual Hitler works. So you can see. Remember when we looked at the von Alts earlier?
Yeah.
You see the influence.
Yes.
So Hitler,
hey, and I just want, for those of you following, when I say that's a very good Hitler, I just mean that I don't like Hitler. I don't expect him to be even remotely. It's not a great work. It's just, considering how bad his taste is, you would give him, I don't know. I was expecting scribbles. But my point is, I do see how an institute, like, well, you know how to do a building, your people need some work.
I mean, Hitler has a degree of skill, right? I mean, he can paint a building.
Well, someone who, he clearly knows some,
I mean, he doesn't seem to have much taste. I mean, even compared to von Alt,
or imagination.
Right.
Again, this could have been a photograph just as easily.
I mean, even compared to von Alt, you can see it's like, I mean, this is just a hastily put together watercolor, I'm sure, but even compared to a von Alt, there's not much comparison.
There's people at play, I guess, like a von Alt, but you don't get to see the people, so it's kind of muddy what they're actually at play doing.
Okay, so this is just flowers.
Okay, like a life study.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that any art student might do. So this, you can see the von Alt influence, and this is something that you'll see.
Here's a tower, a building and a tower, and a fort, I guess, is the way you would describe.
It's a castle, I think, of some sort, but or maybe a town even. But
it's incredibly unexceptional. He gets the building material okay and the proportionality okay, but it's also very flat.
Well, he doesn't get the proportionality correct. This is something you see in a lot of Hitler's works is
Really?
I don't know if he's sloppy or he doesn't know what he's doing, but his perspective is off because, if you look at a von Alt, the buildings are, there's a lot of care taken to get the perspective right on the buildings, but his buildings are going to be wonky.
Yeah, okay.
And I'm not exactly sure why that is. I mean, I think it's because, I don't know. I'm trying to get inside the mind of Hitler now, but I think it's because Hitler is just not that careful. He's not that deliberate. He just doesn't care. So Hitler, he's homeless in Vienna.
And this one here actually is kind of the most interesting. It looks like a house that got hit by a hurricane.
Yeah, let me explain.
The roof has all been ripped off. Yeah.
Right. Let me explain this. So Hitler is homeless in Vienna, and he's trying to make it as an artist, and he just bounces around homeless shelters, and he lives on the street. He's sleeping in the park. I mean, he's homeless, and he's not doing very well. And I think he gets drafted, if I remember the story right. He gets drafted in World War I. World War I comes along, gets drafted, but he gets out of the draft because some kind of health reason or something. But he is doing so poorly on the street that he ends up enlisting anyway.
Yeah.
And when he goes off to war, he starts painting ruins like von Alt. And I don't think I had a von Alt ruin to show you, but von Alt, this is very reminiscent of a von Alt ruin because von Alt also went around painting ruins.
Oh, wow.
So Hitler went around painting buildings that got bombed out in the war.
Oh, hence the planes in the air. I just see them.
Right. So, and these could be, I don't know, these could be Hitler's best works, maybe. I don't know, but...
It might be. He had an eye for destruction.
So here's another Hitler.
right? There
This
is no people in this painting.
You know what
It
this
is,
reminds me of? This reminds me of who's that guy that got famous for the fantasy houses in America?
yeah, Boris Vigilo, or
No,
I
no,
know
not
you,
him, man.
Frank
I can't remember.
Frazetta.
No, 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 no. I
Well,
I can't
it
remember.
is a house in a lake with some sailboats behind it and the mountainside. It is, again, a very unexceptional pastoral painting.
You know, and I think you'll find too that the building, the perspective's a little off. Again,
You're
it
right.
was just
It's kind
sloppy.
of, if you look at it from where the ocean is on the right hand side and move out, the mountain is completely out of scale, and the boats too. You're right.
Okay, so this is this it's one of Hitler's better perspective works. I mean, you can
Yeah.
see he's like
Another giant castles in this country estate, almost like a Versailles style. Go
I
on.
again, I feel like he's really trying to get perspective right in this one, but
Yeah.
again, he's failing, and I'm not even sure why. I mean, is he using a ruler? I don't know.
I think that part of it, the reason is that the background is just this flat white against a white building. So there's almost zero contrast. And his colors are just so thin and diluted that they don't pop out. Even there's some great line work, but it doesn't really feel, it feels more like a sketch than a
Well,
painting.
this could be just something he painted for tourists, so he's not spending a lot of time doing it.
Yeah. It's
Let's go.
just not, yeah, it doesn't stand
Let's
out.
go on. Now, this is interesting. So this is another one of his war
I like
paintings, a
this one.
war
Yeah.
watercolor. Yeah, it's
I
interesting, isn't it?
appreciate the purple clouds and there's there's some actual originality in this one. Just the choice of color and shape. But it looks more like a political cartoon or poster. It's not great work. It's just better than what we've seen.
It looks like he drew it and then he painted over with watercolors.
Yeah, and again,
So
this is interesting that it's what watching the destruction of German towns and German tanks is what is reviving most well in his psyche. That's the reality he seems to be most committed to actually properly replicating.
and, you know, the
Or
interesting thing to me about stuff like this is that there doesn't seem to be a political point of view. I mean, with his
No,
ruins.
yeah.
I mean, because Von Alt also did the same thing. Von Alt painted ruins, but without a political point of view, they're just ruins. But you know, Von Alt is painting ancient ruins. You know, Hitler is painting like scenes from the war. He's in, and there doesn't seem to be. I don't know. What do you think, Chris? There doesn't seem to be any emotional reaction to
Well, I think
this
there's an
carnage.
emotional reaction to the carnage. I think that I'm not building Hitler as a sociopath. I just think that this and the other, that somehow at least destruction, ruins, and I don't want to make a story like he's a character in fiction. I just mean that for whatever reason, these two things have given him the most creative play.
Okay, let's go on. So here is could be a self-portrait.
Okay, it looks like pen work.
Yeah, I think it's graphite. I think that it's I mean it's hastily done. But you know, you can see he has some skill, right?
Yeah,
But you can see also that he's kind of lazy. All right, let's see. Let's okay. So here's another one. You can see the perspective is like slightly off everywhere.
yeah,
It's I don't know. It strikes me as very odd that he just doesn't have that much care with that.
yeah,
Okay, so here's another one. This one you can see. I feel like he's really trying with the perspective, but
yeah,
I almost feel like maybe he's just trying to freehand everything, and
yeah.
I don't know why he would, but
It's a sketch of a column of some sort of entryway building in the federal style. It looks almost like a diagram or just a rough sketch.
yeah, I mean he's
I
not
mean, he's
intending to
really
make.
good at doing buildings. He's just not good at doing anything beyond the building itself. And I will say the perspective and the proportionality is probably the best in this one. Is that him as well?
Yes. So this is the Munich theater, which he loved. I don't know everything. All the
So
perspectives
again,
look
I
off
like
to
a
me.
postcard quality to it.
Yeah, I mean this could be something he made as a postcard for
Yeah.
tourists. Again,
And again, his eye for detail when doing like windows, colonnades, even this particular uh, scene that is painted in there, and it's actually two of them. In the statuary, it's not bad. It's not distinct.
Right. You can definitely see in these works why he didn't get into art school, right?
Well, at least not into a good art school. This is just a very basic moonlight
This
painting.
is called a nocturne, which at the time, right, a lot of artists tried to paint
Yes.
paintings at night. I mean, this is it's simplistic, you know. It's just the moon over the ocean. It's not bad though.
Again, all of his work is can at best is somewhat technically okay.
All right, so that's it with the Hitler. So he you would say he was like a mediocre artist, maybe,
No, I
right?
would just say it's not that he was a mediocre artist, but you can really see, and thank you for bringing this up because I've never really seen his art. His art is not bad, but with the exception, in my opinion, of the house that's been destroyed or the tanks left in the war, they're not distinct. There's nothing that he does as a painter or a drawer that really seems anything more than any other first year art student. So
Well,
it is
yeah.
interesting to see where his strengths lie versus his weaknesses. And
Well, I showed you the Von Alt, so you can see what I'm saying, right? His he's almost mimicking aping Von Alt,
yes,
and he. I didn't show you a lot of Von Alts, but
and more than enough though to get
if
you a
you
point.
if you look at a lot of Von Alts, I think you would agree that definitely he's aping Von Alt almost all the time,
Yeah.
and yeah, so you're exactly right. He's not showing a lot of originality. Let's go to Leibl. So this is another artist that he likes, Hitler likes. Is Wilhelm Leibl, and I'm sure you can see in this illustration, Chris. You can see like the influence on Hitler, right? This looks like,
It's another tower, a village. There's no people. It's nice pen work. It's very precise.
but you
There
can
is
see,
no color and there's no contrast. Somewhat, again, it's not bad, but it's also it's not distinct.
but you may agree with me, Chris, though, that the perspective looks great on this. I
But the
mean, this
perspective is technically perfect. Yeah.
right. I mean, that's something that Hitler doesn't seem to capable of doing.
Well, that's
Here,
true.
here's another. Here's a
A church, some street.
yeah, I believe this is a Leibl. Okay. Okay, here's another Leibl.
You're absolutely right. When I look at this, especially this looks like a station or a office building. I can see where Hitler is really influenced very much by Liebel, but Liebel knows how to use proportionality. He knows how to use color, light. So I definitely can see how a lot of his work is bad Liebel.
Right. So when the art school looks at his work, that's what they're thinking.
Yeah, derivative but not interesting. Here's the
This
mother and child.
this is possibly something Hitler had hanging in his house. Liebl made a lot of these. It's
Okay.
Mary with Jesus. Uh, this is like from this is like from Roman myth.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. It's another portrait. Look how beautiful this portrait is.
Yeah. Very nice.
I don't know if this might have been too abstract for Hitler, but you can see this is
A young boy seated with a haunted look on his face.
it's quite beautiful.
Two young lovers.
Yeah, this is a satyr, I think. I
Oh,
think
even that's
maybe
right.
not. Maybe not.
No, you're right. That's two lovers of a sort.
You can
Can't
see
say they're young.
he's in traditional German clothing,
Yeah,
as is she,
yeah,
and she has a nice look on her face. This is like a Norman Rockwell small town life
yeah,
type thing.
exactly. Again,
Um, here's a peasant sleeping.
like
Um,
another stolen moment.
yeah, here's a weird Liebel portrait. Somebody with their eyes almost closed.
Yeah,
Could be a death portrait. I don't know.
yeah,
Uh, this one, another depiction of peasant life. Okay, small town life where Hitler
yeah,
grew up. Right.
yeah.
I mean, he's very he's
He is
provincial.
very, very sentimental in his tastes.
Okay, so here's some Thoma. This is another artist he liked.
Okay, a woman picking flowers in the field. Very nice painting, very cheering.
So
A
Thoma,
man, a young boy picking flowers in the field. Wow,
yeah.
he
So
likes that.
Thoma, okay. So Thoma did a lot of people picking flowers in a field.
He should have teamed up with Leibl and done drunk monks picking flowers in the field.
So here's just another peasant life
With
image.
the flowers that were picked in the field, which she's too busy sewing to notice.
Okay, here's some Greek mythology.
Oh, interesting. Diana, goddess of the hunt.
Oh, is that what that is? Oh.
I'd assume, unless it's Joan of Arc. Yeah.
So this is something about Jesus.
Jesus and I guess the flag of a country standing in a field, whichever flag that is. Could be Norway.
This is, if I remember right, Thoma did some like cartoons.
Yeah, Der
And
Hini Hello.
he was kind of famous for these. So like, they're cute. You know, they're like little boys in armor. And,
Yeah. Yeah, very sentimental again, like Rockwell.
so you know, if you think about it, you know, it's like a romanticization of warfare, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, this
I
is
don't
the
want to get
kinda...
too psychological with Hitler. I can only just say what it looks like to me.
Okay.
And that's Pan with his flute, playing it at a nocturne by himself on a rock.
I mean, these are very conventional, I'd say.
Yeah.
This one is a little bit more unconventional, but
A satyr talking to a human, trying to explain something at midnight. Could be Pan again, though. Actually, it could be Pan as an older man because I forgot Pan is got hooves. So it could be just an obsession with Pan, who was the Prince of Fairies, as well as sometimes the Roman version of Pan. I forgot now, Bacchanal. So it could be frivolity and party.
So there's another Jesus.
Bacchus, thank you.
Yeah, Bacchus. Yeah. There's another Jesus.
Yeah.
This is, I think.
Poseidon.
Yeah. So Thoma did a series of these, I believe. It's like, I think this is supposed to represent a month. I'm not sure which one now.
Okay.
Oh, there's a self-portrait.
It's a very nice self-portrait. His ability to actually capture himself is quite amazing. I'm always amazed in the era before photography that a certain level of self-portrait could be this good. And he did a remarkable job. I like the background too, the colors and the light. This is my favorite of the Thomas by far.
Yeah, these
And of
painters...
Hitler's taste in art, I think this is the artist I also most personally like. So this is where I would compliment, even though he's a sentimentalist, his taste.
Let's look at some Makart. It's Hans Makart. So you can see this is another like
Almost
Greek,
like a Ferret
Roman
Noir.
myth.
Yeah.
Another one of those.
Oh, yeah.
This is Bacchus. Yeah, it is
Yeah,
literally
more.
Bacchus having fun.
They really loved Bacchus in the 19th century and the 18th century.
You know, the interesting thing I found about their taste in art, the Nazis, is they're not prudes. I mean,
No,
they're
they
still
like
Europeans.
they like the celebration of life. They just don't like anything that questions their understanding of reality. And that's a very broad, I'm painting with a broad brush.
No, I think you got it. Here's a building. Okay, Makart, I don't think he paints a lot of buildings, but you see this one. Look how beautiful this is. I mean,
Yeah.
this is the kind of thing Hitler probably wished he could have painted, but
Probably.
I don't know. It just
No, because this building is very similar to something we just saw earlier that Hitler did work on. And again, this Makart has much more weight and depth and dimensionality. Hitler, I'm sure, was attempting to get this kind of volume and depth and perspective in his large ceremonial buildings and wasn't quite as adept. And again, I'm not really trying to say Hitler is a bad artist, so therefore he becomes a monster of a human being or anything. I'm just saying it is interesting to see. I'll leave it there for your interpretation, Randall.
Well, no, I think you're right. Let's yeah. So Hitler just wasn't very careful. He was sloppy.
Yeah.
This is just a grate in the water. I think I picked this one because it just shows that even all artists of this time were trying to break the boundaries of art. You know, they were trying to move beyond the straitjacket that they were in at the time.
Yes.
This is a beautiful, just a beautiful like court scene. Okay, let's go on. This is like another Greek Roman mythology scene. I mean, this is
Nice.
the kind of thing. These things were kind of big in the art market at the time. This is the kind of stuff that people would buy and put on their walls. Hitler
Yeah.
probably had tons of stuff like this on his walls. Um,
Nudes. Okay. Could be
this
the.
is this is supposed to represent the five senses, so it's five different paintings. You hang
Oh,
them up on your
nice.
wall. And you can see this is a naked woman. I mean, again, they weren't prudes, right? These Nazis.
Where's tastes? I see smell. I see touch.
I have no idea.
Okay. Fair enough.
Smell,
Touch,
hearing,
hearing.
touch, sight, and then what's left?
I, the woman with the child.
I don't know. But yes.
Hmm.
Let's see. This is the gifts of the sea. Uh,
Another tableau of people just in various recreations with each other, mothers and children for the most part.
I'm not sure what this one is. Some sort of I
Demon
think that's a
that,
satyr.
yeah, and a mother with mother with children.
This is
Another church. It's actually quite nice in detail.
Saint Michael. It's yeah. So you can see. I mean, this is so precise. It looks almost like a photograph.
Yes, this is very photorealistic.
Okay. So this is the kind of work that Hitler probably admired and wanted to emulate.
Okay,
But
so it was very literal.
okay. I think we already saw this one. Yep.
Right.
Okay. Let's look at Carl Spitzweg. Now he liked
Mhm.
Spitzweg a lot. Let's see. So Spitzweg has a cartoony quality. It's close to Norman Rockwell.
Looks like an army captain waiting outside the door of someone he has romantic and interest in. As he keeps his arm behind his
Well,
back, we can only
he's
assume he's carrying flowers.
he's swatting a fly. He's trying to swat a fly.
Oh, I totally misread that.
Um. Okay. Here's a guy
A
drunk.
drunken soldier.
Okay, so this is
Two men out in the front yard.
I think this is called the Childhood Friends,
Oh,
and
getting together again. Nice.
yeah, it's like another image of small town life.
Yeah,
I mean,
another vignette of life, of slice of life.
okay, this is just soldiers. I don't know. They're coming in. They're walking through town.
Hmm.
Spitzweg is another painter. There's a lot of romanticization of the military. Sunday walk. This is just like some small town people going for a walk in the meadow.
Yeah.
Um, this work is beautiful, isn't it? Just somebody handing notes down to their neighbor lives downstairs, I think.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay, this is a man in his library with his nose in a book.
Again, beautiful little scenes of life.
This
A
is,
man with a nose in his flowers.
I believe, this is a soldier smelling a flower.
What a
And there's,
difference between a man with his nose in his book in a large library and a young soldier out in the field smelling a beautiful rose.
and of course, there's like it looks like there's a young girl like taking a nap in the meadow over here. So it's like
Maybe he's about to become and court her. People in nature.
this is called Hermit playing the violin. So there's a guy in the
Yeah.
violin. Yeah. So let's see. Okay, I don't know what this one is. This is
Musicians at night in a small town.
yes.
The
This
older
is
couple in bed. Old man in bed, sorry, with his umbrella.
I think this is called The Poor Poet. This is
Oh.
I think this is one of the more famous Spitzwigs.
Oh, I get it. The umbrella is there because he's got a leak in his roof and he can't afford to get his roof repaired.
Rockwellian, isn't it? Um,
Highly.
Let's see.
Rockwell was born in 1894, so it's interesting to me that Rockwell, it just the coincidence is just clearly by circumstance.
Okay, have you heard of Arno Breker?
No.
So Arno Breker was famous because he was a
Mm-hmm.
sculptor, and the Nazis loved his work. He had this weird style that predated the Nazi Party. It was this weird style that it wasn't realistic. It was abstract, but it kind of made people look like mythological figures. You know, like here is Breker right here, working on a bust, and you can see he always makes the top part of the head really big. Do you see? I think it's bigger than it would be in real life, slightly, and that gives it a quality of making this person seem almost heroic and mythological, larger than life.
Makes sense.
So here is
Salvador Dali.
it's a bust of Dali by Breker, and you can see what I'm talking about. See, the top of the head is a lot bigger. It's like it makes Dali look heroic.
It does. It's a nice photo.
Now here's a famous nude. He did a lot of nudes. The Nazis loved his nudes, so he would make these
Wow, look at the
perfect
shoulders, the pecs on that dude.
Yeah,
He has small waist, broad chest, nice defined shoulders, good face.
I'm
just going to point out, at this point in my life, anybody who's got the six-pack abs and the broad V-shaped shoulders and chest, I'm like, damn, that is. I wonder who his trainer is.
The Nazis were. There were a lot of closeted homosexuals probably in the Nazi Party, and out homosexuals that some were purged eventually.
I don't think this has anything to do with homosexuality because that's just a very normal penis. I was just really looking at just the way that guy is just really ripped.
I mean, you could argue that these are homoerotic works, though, couldn't you? I mean,
no, not really.
No?
I think no. I just think it's the beauty of the human body.
Let's look at okay. Well,
that's the Randall's interpretation.
Okay, well, remember this sculpture, and let's look at one of Breker's women.
Okay.
See, the women that he makes, I feel like are much more realistic. Where the men are more heroic
Promethean.
and fantastic.
That's probably
But
true.
I could be wrong. I don't know. Okay, so here is Richard Wagner. Okay, Wagner was
Wagner.
Wagner was Hitler's favorite composer.
Yes.
I think Hitler at some point said that all you need, if you want to understand the Nazis, you just have to listen to Wagner.
This is where Hitler's taste and my taste meet on the Venn diagram. Because Wagner was a big believer in Frederick Abar. So in the 11th century, one of the great war heroes of ancient Teutonic history, a knight named Frederick Barbarossa. So a lot of Wagner's books, the librettos of his operas, are really about, he drew a connection between Norse mythology and German history. So Vikings, fighters, he celebrated the mythology of Scandinavia and Germany and a great German spirit. So he was quite the nationalist in his operas. And I could certainly see if you were a nationalist, just in the same way, Mussolini found the same thing in opera of Italy and Italian Roman history. Hitler the same. And
Right.
There's a lot of complicated work going on in Wagner on the tonal scale and his use of atonality and dissonant notes that I'm not entirely sure if Hitler was that hip to it or not, but yeah, everybody in Israel, they banned Wagner for like 30 years for this reason.
Well, the fascists are all obsessed with creating a national identity, right? That's part of
Well, that's true. Yeah, in any country that is a fascist country, they try to forge a national, unlike the U.S. Okay, almost any country that embraces nationalism looks to some of its art to reinforce it, like we do with country music.
Here is a Liszt.
Franz Liszt, yeah,
Yeah, so
Austrian
he was a big he was a popular piano player. Let's go on.
composer, yeah.
This is another Brecker, so this is less realistic, but I think this is
More
more
Promethean.
yes, I think this is more. This is a better example of what the Nazis liked. They liked
An
all these,
Uberman.
they love these busts
Well, it's an
or these
Uberman.
statues. Yeah,
Yeah. They were talking about that.
it's a
That's
closer
part
up of it.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is another one.
The most
see-
Promethean so far.
He made a lot of these. Now here's a woman. Now see, whenever he makes women, they don't they're
The
not as heroic looking.
proportionality is less Promethean for sure. That one looks more symbolic than even realistic.
There's a Brecker.
Yeah.
That still remains, I think. And that's it. So he continued to, after the Nazis fell, he continued to work, I believe. Let's see. Here's Bordone. So Bordone is a little earlier, but you can see this guy is like there's a court scene.
And another slice of life, another a nice composition of different people and activities.
Right. Here's Jesus.
Okay.
Here is Adoration of the Shepherds. Here is this is a famous one. This guy's playing chess. Let's see. It's really a slice of life, isn't it? Guys playing chess.
Yeah. These little moments.
This one is Portrait of Courtesans at the Dressing Table. It's just a woman getting dressed.
Well, they were courtesans, so they were part of getting dressed means they were getting off work.
This is I'm not sure. This is Cupid. This is a Cupid.
Oh wow! So he's trying to make this man and woman fall in love with each other, so that they can have babies. Nice.
This is I don't know, just some weird Roman scene.
Right.
Slice
With
of life
gods.
almost.
And, yeah. Well,
Looks
something
like they're
that.
fighting. I don't know what's going
It
on.
looks like they're fighting in the sky too, on clouds.
It could be the sack of Rome. This is probably the sack of Rome.
Probably.
Let's look at. Okay, so this is something that Titian. He was, I think, a Renaissance painter, and the Nazis.
Did you say Titian?
Is it Titian or how
It's
do you
just
say it?
it says Titian.
Titian. So he was big with the Nazis. They had him hanging up everywhere. So they liked him because you could see it's like he has this like this classical style. It's like a how would you describe it? Just
The neoclassical style he uses. He was known for his ability to really capture eyes and facial features very well. He's a very popular artist. You can see him in most of your better museums. Striking tableaus and expressions.
Let's look at Feuerbach.
That I don't know.
So Feuerbach was highly popular with these guys too, and you can see he's similar to Titian. A lot of detail in these. Let's see.
Are there any particular artists or events that you? I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go on.
Well, I was just gonna say this is called Nana, and Feuerbach had made a bunch of these, and Hitler probably had one of these hanging up in his main residence. It could
Very
have been
nice
this
one.
one. It could have been this one.
Very pretty. Very nice. Very. Again, he must have admired what he was not good at, which is capturing faces. I was gonna say, is there any? Because I know that we've been going through quite a few artists. Would you say there are some artists left that we haven't covered that you really want to get to, or any other elements regarding art you want to get to? Do you want to talk about the famous German art exhibition of degenerate art to give you a sense of what Hitler did impose on art when he became?
All right, I'll just sum this up by saying that so when the Nazis come to power, I think I already mentioned at the beginning, they started the Reich Culture Chamber, and they wanted to regulate art. Here's a Goebbels quote. He said, "We National Socialists are not unmodern. Actually, they were.
Mhm.
We are the carrier of a new modernity, not only in politics and in social matters, but also in art and intellectual matters." Um, there was a dispute within the Nazis about expressionism, but then Hitler declared there would be no place for modernist experimentation in the Reich. They outlawed the Reich Culture Chamber outlawed jazz, okay, and they and they also outlawed the font Fraktur. Now you can imagine.
Well,
Okay,
jazz
Chris.
was something that even, originally Mussolini had allowed in Italy. Then he too outlawed it. And it may have been that Mussolini outlawed hot jazz first because it spoke about, first off, most jazz at this period in history came from America, and most jazz at this period in history featured Black Americans. So any kind of country with a very strong sense of racism or anti-Americanism really did not like jazz. Very interesting coincidence, at least with Mussolini, is that his eldest son Romano would go on to become a very famous jazz musician on the international jazz scene, though Mussolini's granddaughter is now the leader of the Italian Fascist Party. So what comes around goes around.
Well, I'll just say, about jazz. Jazz is similar to the spiritualism in that they're trying to access the subconscious. There's that degree of improvisation.
Yeah.
It's you can see politically, ideologically, the conflict there. But I will say
They
that
made that movie Swing Kids, remember?
Swing Kid. You mean the Disney movie?
Yes. It
I
was
love that movie.
it was with
Christian
Kenneth
Bale.
Branagh. Yeah, and Kenneth Branagh, and the whole idea that, they were into to swing, and that was good. Yeah, that. But it was also a lot of great. There was a very famous German jazz harmonist band in the 20s and 30s. That's the other problem, is a lot of the people, the undesirables, the Jews, the homosexuals, cabaret lifestyle was tied up into American music like jazz. So that could almost be its own episode. I was really thinking more about the famous degenerate art show that they did.
Right. Well, I mean, the Nazis are absurd. They banned a font called Fraktur. You can look that up. But yeah, 1937. By 1937, the Nazis had like so much control over Europe. They had collected all this art, and Hitler decided that what needed to be done was they needed to put together an art show of what art not to make, and they called it
Yeah.
the Degenerate Art Exhibition. And I believe it toured Germany with art that was pro-Nazi art.
But I just think it's amazing to have an art exhibition to show people what kind of art you don't like, which I guess technically is what we did too on this episode, is show you what art we don't like to Hitler. But yeah, I mean, that's how much they took it seriously. That was almost a form of art education.
Let me read a list of names of artists who are in the Degenerate Art Show: Erich Heckel, Emil Nold, Ernest Ludwig Kirchner, Max Beckmann, Alexander Archipenko.
So all the guys in the Blue Rider, all the Blue Riders you've been naming.
Right. Marc Chagall, James Ensor, Henri Matisse, Jane Mitzinger, Pablo Picasso, Vincent van Gogh, Paul
Cubist.
Klee, Oscar Koshka, Wassily
Expression.
Kandinsky,
Yep.
George Grosz. So
So all of the great expressionistic, Dadaist, Cubist, Blue Riders, anything that was truly remarkably good coming out of Germany and Austria and France in this part of its history, that's pretty freaking amazing, isn't it? Now, the thing that no one talks about is, as the war progressed, as they confiscated Jewish art dealers' work, the Germans had a large collection of stolen art that they kept and treasured and used for financial purposes.
right.
So even though Hitler did not aesthetically like any of this art, he didn't destroy it either.
Well, I'll say something also about after reading Speer's book. The Nazis, they were obsessed with art in every way you can imagine. They all collected it. When they took power, they started raiding the local museums and demanding to borrow paintings if they liked them. They would hang up the paintings in their residences, and it was.
And then they even took people's property who owned art, especially a lot
Oh
of
yeah,
Jewish art
yeah.
dealers.
Well, I mean, when I say they borrowed them, I mean they're stealing these works. You know, I
Yeah,
mean,
not just from museums though, from homes as well.
oh, of course, of course. I mean, well, if the Jews or any people that were interned, I mean, they were their possessions were taken. If they had art, the Nazis would take them. I
But
mean,
you were going to say that Speer wrote something about this?
well, Speer wrote about in his book. There's a lot about the art that they collected. Yeah, so the Nazis they collected all this art, and I'll say something interesting too is that even though Hitler was obsessed with degenerate art, and a lot of the Nazis maybe Hitler was the most obsessed with it, with this idea, and most of the other Nazis they would collect this art and they would hide it from Hitler. They'd put it away in their basement or whatever. Because they weren't so obsessed with this idea. They, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is they just it was Hitler was the driving force of this whole thing. It was his like lack of taste that drove this whole idea of degenerate art.
Okay. Well,
And
is there a go on, continue.
yeah, and you can see, today all the list of artists I read. I mean, there were hundreds of artists in the degenerate art show, but probably all the artists you've ever heard about today were in the degenerate art show. And I believe, and it was hard for me to get data on this, but I believe that the degenerate art show was a hit to the disappointment of Hitler and other Nazis, because people wanted to see the art, and they and Hitler and others convinced themselves that people were going because they wanted to see what not to make, but the degenerate art show was obviously going to be the good show, right? I mean, because there were two shows. There were two concurrent shows. There was the pro-Nazi art show and the degenerate art show. They toured at the same time. And from what I've read, I don't know how accurate it is, but the degenerate art show was packed. And the Nazi art show, nobody wanted to go to.
Well, that would be like if your high school said, look, kids, we want to teach you good and bad behavior. So we're going to do a class trip to the church, and we're going to do a class trip to the strip club. You guys can only go to one of those trips, and you don't worry, we're not telling your parents which one. So which one do you want to do, church or strip club? Oh, yeah, I really want to see why I shouldn't go to a strip club. It is you. I mean, I know we're having a lot of fun, but it is. I think if you could make an overall statement that encapsulates everything we've covered today, what would you say, Randall?
Well, I mean, I think if you listen to all these shows, and I have because we did them all, you would see that what really riled people like Hitler and the Nazis is the birth of the modern world. They couldn't deal with it. They couldn't deal with the fact that Christianity as a belief system was fading away, was not accurate anymore, wasn't appropriate anymore. They couldn't deal with all the changes in society. They couldn't deal with all the changes in the culture. And part of what they were trying to do was they were trying to turn back the clock. I mean, and they were living at a time when it seemed like everything was happening all at once. I mean, I could see how bewildered people must have been. And, for somebody like Hitler, who comes from a tiny town in Germany and probably doesn't have a lot of education, there's no internet like today. I mean, who knows? I mean, when Hitler goes to Vienna, that's the first time he'd ever seen a Jewish person or met a Jewish person, perhaps. But definitely other races. Okay?
All right. Well, I wanted to say, I think I really appreciated what you did in this episode, because you really did take what we've been talking about for 6 episodes, which is once there is a shift from art, but art is especially really from the Renaissance on, art was in the service of religion, depicting morals and ethics within a Christian framework, because the Jews and the Muslims don't allow it, and in service of the state values, in service of ethics. Once we get to abstractionism, you have all of, as you would say, reactionary things. Now, you've talked about how the fascists find that abstract art is a threat to national identity. I think I just want to conclude, if you don't mind, that concurrently while this is going on in Germany and in the Soviet Union, social realism, which is clearly there are no Christian values. It's an atheist country, but social realism uses Promethean figures, depicts scenes from everyday life, and is very literalist in its depictions. Social realism exists also much in the same way that what Hitler wanted of inculcating certain ethics and values. And then we did a whole episode, folks, go back to this episode. Randall, I think maybe we'll put a link to it, about how when abstractionism does come, the United States, the CIA, uses it as a way to fight social realism. There's a certain feeling that abstractionism, because of its ambivalence, can be used as a tabula rasa for whatever you want to project on it. So the United States response is to take that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just add that the CIA really thinks that Jackson Pollock style modernism, Jackson Pollock in particular, is a perfect advertisement for the United States. It shows that the United States is on the cutting edge. The United States is a modern country. So when people are going to contrast Jackson Pollock with the stuff coming out of Russia, they're going to see that the United States is intellectually, aesthetically superior.
Right, and then abstractionism becomes a standpoint, not just for U.S. values, but for capitalist values, for modernity, for the idea that everything is relative, subjective, and interpretational, and that we don't live in a world of absolutes. So the fascinating thing, as we're about to wrap it up, and you've done such a brilliant job, is to show that the way our society reacts to this giant aesthetic shift from figurative art to abstractionist art, from representational reality to an interpretive, albeit ambivalent sense of reality, is to figure out how does it serve the political purposes of any particular political structure. Because either such a change is a threat, like it is to the fascists or to the Soviets, or it's a boon to capitalists and Western democracies. Well, even though technically as art, it truly exists outside of that realm.
Well, don't you think, just from looking at these works, don't you think that analyzing this from the perspective of art, don't you think this really shows that fascism is a reactionary movement, a retro movement in a sense?
Absolutely, and to that same degree too, I will say that the ambivalence, the way that it's manipulated by the United States, Western democracies, and capitalism, to the point where the Four Seasons Hotel wants to put Rothko artwork in their lunch area so people can just not be distracted by anything particular. They work to both ends. And this is what happens, I feel, that you can't really put a political ideology in art. Art exists independent, and every time you try to coerce it to your bidding, you end up with some variation of the degenerate show where people just make their own choices. So thank you, Randall. Please, could you give us a link to some of these photos that you took?
And well, I'll put a slideshow together for people.
And could you put a link to that episode that we referenced?
Yeah, of course.
I think you guys will find that if you now listen to that as a companion piece to this one, you'll really get a sense of how the 20th century is when the governments of in different world orders decided that even art, fine art, has a place in their own political machinations. And for that, I'd like to say thank you so much for running with us this long. We are going to go back to art again, but we're probably going to not go back to art right away. So until then, next week, something completely different. I'm Chris.
I'm Randall.
And we'll talk again soon. Goodbye.
Bye.